Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I hope all of you are having fantastic Friday, special Friday show, because I have been on the road up in Washington, D.C. for the past several days. I will be down in Miami for the national title game on Monday, Indiana-Miami. I cannot wait to watch that one in person. We'll probably have a bunch of cool OutKick content for you associated with that game. And also, not going to suck, we'll have some cool stuff coming down the line at the Super Bowl, which is out in San Francisco this year. Just FYI. Awesome time up in Washington, D.C. Got to do a lot of cool things, including hang out a bit with President Trump in the Oval Office, and we had a fun debate about the worst trades in the history of sports. I'll get into that with you in a little bit, but I wanted to start with several different stories that are out there. We've already talked quite a lot about this, but I do think Indiana stands on the precipice of history here. If they are able to go 16-0 and beat Miami, then they will become, I really do believe this, the greatest college football team of all time. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that they would beat, this is significant, not necessarily that they would beat every other team, but just if you analyze the resume, because again, it's hard to argue who would win over different eras because we're in a profoundly different era now than we were even just a few years ago. 2019 LSU right now, I would say, is the greatest team that I have seen in college football. Undefeated, Heisman Trophy winning champion, Jamar Chase at wide receiver, Joe Burrow obviously unstoppable at quarterback, the gauntlet that they ran through. But I start to think now you look at Indiana, and I think it's fair to say based on the results that have occurred in the course of the postseason, the Big Ten was the best conference in football this year. Now, I understand a lot of people out in the SEC, that upsets them, but I'm always looking at the data. And if you look at what happened in the bowl games and you look at what happened in the postseason, Indiana not only has gone 15-0, they have done it in the best conference in football. They have beat the best teams. They beat Oregon twice in dominant fashion, destroyed Oregon in the Final Four. They put up an incredible beatdown of the in the first round that Indiana played in the playoff of Alabama. I mean, when you devour, destroy, decapitate metaphorically both Alabama and Oregon back to back, when you beat Ohio State in the game before that in the Big Ten title game at a neutral site, and when you have a quarterback who wins the Heisman Trophy, I think if Indiana goes 16-0, they will be the best team in the history of college football. I really do believe that. No one has ever gotten to 16-0 before. I think in the years ahead, as parity continues to rain down in NIL with the transfer portal, everything else, I think the chances of there being 16-0 teams are minimal. And so I think this Indiana team is going to continue to look better and better. Having said that, I'm taking Miami plus the points. I think it's going to be a low-scoring defensive game. Believe it or not, it's actually going to be a little bit chilly down in Miami, probably like 55 degrees, not going to be some warm, perfect weather condition relative to Miami. So I can't wait to see that environment, and I can't wait to check it out as we finally get closer and closer to the kickoff of the college football national title game, which, by the way, I think probably should be tonight. Honestly, if you were asking me, I think they should play on Friday going into Saturday, Sunday. Now, I know everybody out there says, oh my goodness, because the NFL's got 2 games on Saturday and 2 games on Sunday. And I understand why ESPN wants the Monday night window, because a lot of people are used to watching the college football and more so the NFL. But you start college football with a big Labor Day game on Monday, but they have set the tone of, hey, there's always going to be Monday night football. And so people are kind of conditioned to it. My concern is, I think in college football, I think I have to spend more time thinking about this, is by the time you get to Monday, a lot of people are sated with double football games on Saturday, double football games on Sunday. Would you rather be the dessert that people might not have enough room for, or would you rather be the appetizer? I kind of feel like it would be better if college football were the appetizer and we were playing this game tonight on a Friday going into the NFL weekend as opposed to NFL getting all of the attention on Saturday and Sunday, and even the reaction still pouring in from the NFL having set the AFC and the NFC championship games before we get to the college football playoff on Monday. Okay, I got a provocative take for you here. I probably got a bunch of provocative takes for you here in the program today. Can we pull up the rankings? This was shared from Nielsen of all of the most popular markets for college football in the entire country. Can we see that? Okay, we've got it up on the screen there. What you see is basically the South, and I'm expansively including Oklahoma in the South, so people out there will stop with sending me messages. What you basically see is the South and 3 huge markets in Ohio. Okay, right up there, I believe I am correct in remembering that. I can't see it because it's too far away. Okay, I got a provocative thesis for you based on this. Ohio State culturally belongs in the SEC. Again, not necessarily any other reason other than culturally. I understand everybody out there who says Ohio is not in the SEC. I get it. But by the way, when you got USC and Oregon and all these different teams in the Big Ten, and when you have Stanford and Cal in the Atlantic Coast Conference, I think we can maybe stop with the geographic certainty here. Culturally, Ohio State should be an SEC school. Ohio State would fit better in the SEC than they do in the Big Ten. Think about how often, and Buckeye fans, deep down, they know it's true, even though they're going to react like crazy. Think about how often you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, and you take a trip to Maryland or Rutgers or Purdue or any number, Minnesota, of places, and you sit in there and you think to yourself, yeah, this is not a great environment for college football. I wish this game were being played in the shoe. Conversely, imagine Ohio State going on the road in Tuscaloosa, in Austin, in Norman, in Knoxville, in Athens, in Gainesville, Florida, in Baton Rouge. It would be what college football is all about. Ohio State fans would love, with every fiber of their being, going to these environments and competing against other schools that care as much about college football as they do. They would soak up the atmosphere, the pomp, the circumstance, the pageantry. Culturally, Ohio State belongs in the SEC. Now, I talked about this a while ago with another school, and a lot of you agreed, a lot of you disagreed. I said the same thing about Nebraska. I said Nebraska, actually, if you go look at Nebraska, the best rivals for Nebraska are still straight south, right? Nebraska versus Texas, Nebraska versus Texas A&M, heck, Nebraska versus Arkansas, Nebraska versus Missouri. Nebraska belongs in the SEC culturally too. They live and breathe college football in Lincoln in the same way that if you look at those ratings of who turns on their televisions and actually watches the games, in the same way that the heartbeat of the South exists. Now, there are other schools culturally that I think belong in the SEC too. Clemson, right? Clemson should be culturally in the SEC. Florida State, culturally, should be in the SEC. That isn't really a surprise. I mean, I think a lot of people out there, Clemson fans, look at me and they say, of course. Florida State fans look at me. I went and watched 2 games in person this year. Fabulous new stadium. Loved it. People were tremendous in terms of their hospitality at Florida State. I went and watched Alabama, Florida State, and I went and watched Miami, Florida State. I spend a lot of time now down on the Florida Gulf Coast in the 30A area, and it's an easy trip over if you've never been before to go watch a Florida State game if you're down there. If you're in Destin, if you're in Panama City Beach, if you're in Rosemary, if you're in Seaside, for those of you who know these communities, that's a nice little easy 2-hour drive, no traffic. You can go in and out same day. I did it twice this past year. Florida State should be in the SEC. Now, you can argue, hey, do they need those schools? right? You can argue whether you've already got Florida, you've already got South Carolina. Do you need to double up and add culturally more schools in that footprint? How does the money get spent? Does it make sense? All those things I understand. But culturally, Florida State, Clemson, Ohio State, Nebraska belong in the SEC. And I think deep down, even though Ohio State Buckeye fans are going to react, some of them, with disdain to this take, I think if they got in the SEC and they started traveling around to all the SEC campuses, home and home, and by the way, I think this would be true for SEC fans going to Ohio State. I think they would say, oh, wow, this is a cool environment. I'm glad we got to do it. In fact, I bet a bunch of you are Texas fans right now watching this take and saying, yeah, you know what? That trip to Columbus was really cool. Even though we lost, that trip to Columbus was really cool. I think a lot of you Oklahoma who remember when Baker Mayfield planted the flag, I think a lot of you who are Sooner fans went to Ohio State and you said, you know what? This is a pretty cool environment. And I'm in favor, by the way, of going to games everywhere. I think the coolest thing about college football is how unique the road environments are. You're looking at a guy who wrote and started basically his career going around to every SEC football stadium and writing a book called Dixieland Delight, which came out almost 20 years ago now. So I legitimately started my career writing about the culture of college football. So I feel like I have been a fan in terms of analyzing this for better than nearly a generation, better than almost anybody out there. I've spent more time on it. I've been fortunate to be to so many great places out there in the college football landscape. But Ohio State belongs in the SEC culturally. Now, you can argue about geographically. You can argue about the business of whether it makes sense. You can argue about the history and legacy of the Big Ten. All of those things are strong counter arguments. I'm not dismissing them, but I'm just saying culturally, in terms of how much people love college football in Ohio and how much that passion translates into Ohio State, it means more in Ohio like it means more in the South. And I don't think you can say that about that many different schools out there. They should be in the SEC. All right. Let me pull up the PrizePicks read, if we would. I got a pick for you this weekend. Brock Purdy, more than 1/2 touchdown. Drake May, more than 1/2 touchdown. Josh Allen, more than 1/2 touchdown. Bo Nix, more than 1/2 touchdown. Had a great dinner with the PrizePicks team on Wednesday night in D.C. I love these guys. They do really, really good work. They've built a great business. Had a really good time talking with them. And they're now available in all 50 states. And they are really rolling in all fronts. And it has been fun to watch this business grow. And I got a great pick for you. Right now, that pays out at nearly 2-1. That is NFL divisional round playoff games, which we're going to talk about in some degree with Kelly Stewart. We're doing the fade here in a moment. But Brock Purdy, more than 1/2 touchdown. Drake May, more than 1/2 touchdown. Josh Allen, more than 1/2 touchdown. Bo Nix, more than 1/2 touchdown. Also, you can check out the max discount in the PrizePicks app this Friday, 3 p.m. through Sunday. This weekend, C.J. Stroud just needs 1 passing yard to win. Okay, well, we'll add that to the play here, too. That is a fun addition. Gives us 5 winners as opposed to 4. And you can get hooked up and make sure that you don't miss anything there. And we'll have some fun. With PrizePicks, use code OutKick. All 50 states, you can get hooked up, and you will be glad that you did it. Okay. Picks, by the way, NFL divisional round. We're going to discuss these in earnest. We will clip and share. Encourage you to watch the fade with Kelly Stewart. I'm taking the Bills money line against the Broncos. I think Josh Allen gets it done on the road. I gave these out, by the way, on the FS1 OutKick show. I've got the 49ers plus 7.5 was the number I got against the Seahawks. Those are the Saturday games. Then I'm taking the Patriots to take down the Texans by a field goal or more. Rams, Bears. I'm taking the Bears plus the points in what is going to be a frigid environment in Chicago. And then I'm going to take the over 49.5. I mentioned that I was in D.C. The last couple of days, why there's been no OutKick shows. I've been traveling a lot. I was in the Oval Office, and I was in the West Wing of the White House. I can't talk about what the meeting that I was there for was about. It's not public yet. It involves sports. Hopefully, at one point in the future, I'll be able to talk about it. It's a cool idea, and I think a lot of you would benefit from it if it's able to happen. But I did visit with President Trump in the Oval Office, and we got talking about a lot of different subjects, but I thought this one was fun. President wanted to talk about worst trades in the history of sports, 100%. So we go in, and he says, hey, I was watching Luka play the other night, and he said, what in the world were the Dallas Mavericks thinking when they made the decision to trade Luka? And again, this is not direct quotes, but this is just a rough conversation that the president, we were having. And he said, I think it's the second worst trade in the history of sports. And he said, clearly, number one worst trade, Babe Ruth, given up by the Red Sox to the Yankees. And we agreed, yeah, Babe Ruth, worst trade in the history of sports. And he said, I think Luka is the second worst trade in the history of sports. I have no idea what the Dallas Mavericks were thinking. He may be the best player when he's healthy in all of sports. And so we were talking about that. And I said, actually, Mr. President, all due respect, I think you're wrong. I think the second worst trade is actually when the Minnesota Vikings gave up all the draft picks for Herschel Walker. The president says, Herschel's a good friend of mine. I believe Herschel is now the ambassador to the Bahamas, and I worked hard to try to get Herschel elected to the Senate in Georgia. I love Herschel Walker, really good dude. Dallas Cowboys fleeced the Minnesota Vikings in that trade back in the late 80s, if I'm remembering correctly. And then the president and I started debating. It was like a sports debate show. It was like, they got a ton of unbelievable picks, and they completely remade the entire roster and set the dynasty table for the Dallas Cowboys. President's sitting there, and he's like, yeah, that is a good argument, too. So we agree that the three worst trades in the history of sports are Babe Ruth, we agreed. Two, I don't know if he came to my side or if he was willing to change, but he thought Luka. I think it's Herschel. But those are the triumvirate of the worst trades in the history of sports. Is that a fair take? Is that a fair Triple Crown presidential debate versus me analysis? So that was fun. I mean, the president is a monster sports fan, and that's what he wanted to get into, was debating the worst trades in the history of sports. Now, so that was fun. That's a little behind the scenes of what I was doing on Wednesday up in Washington, D.C. Here is something that is, I think, not as positive, not as fun of a debate. We have right now Major League Baseball on the precipice of complete collapse. Kyle Tucker, 4-year, $240 million contract. Okay? I've got some stats for you guys about why I think this is such a disaster. Right now, Shohei Ohtani makes $70 million a year. And some of you out there are going to say, well, some of it's deferred. Okay. All right, tax nerds. Some of that compensation is deferred and it will actually arrive at, okay. $70 million a year for Shohei Ohtani. Kyle Tucker, $60 million a year. Highest average values in Major League Baseball. $130 million combined for Shohei and Kyle Tucker. That is more, just those two players, more than 10 Major League Baseball clubs spent on their entire payrolls last year. Think about this. Just Shohei and Kyle Tucker are more than the Colorado Rockies spent. The Colorado Rockies spent $120 million total in entire roster compensation last year. Cincinnati Reds, $115 million. By the way, this is the work of Grant McCauley. Good work by him putting this all together. The Milwaukee Brewers, $115 million. Washington Nationals, $107 million. Cleveland, don't call them the Guardians. They're still the Indians, $100 million. Pittsburgh Pirates, $87 million. White Sox, $82 million. Rays, $79 million. A's, $73 million. The Miami Marlins, $67 million. So Miami spends almost less on its entire roster than Kyle Tucker will be getting from the Dodgers, and spends less than what Shohei is getting from the Dodgers. This is untenable. Whatever your overall perspective is on sports, this is untenable and this is bad for Major League Baseball. Here's some more stats. Dodger contracts worth more than $100 million. Shohei, 10 years, $700 million. Mookie Betts, 12 years, $365 million. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, 12 years, $325 million. Kyle Tucker, 4 years, $240 million. Blake Snell, 5 years, $182 million. Freddie Freeman, 6 years, $162 million. Will Smith, 10 years, $140 million. Tyler Glasnow, 5 years, $136 million. Okay? Unacceptable long-term for this to be happening. Okay? So I truly do not believe that we are going to be able to have Major League Baseball in 2027. There's going to be a lockout. If you love baseball, I hope you enjoy the 2026 season because it's going to take a long time, I think, for us to get a resolution in 2027. And I think what ultimately has to happen is a salary cap. And we have to have a shared revenue pile for players like we have in the NBA and like we have in the NFL. Roughly, players get half and the teams get half. And the rising tide lifts all boats. And I understand the Major League Baseball Players Association has fought hard against the salary cap, but this is going to, if it hasn't already, destroy the fabric of Major League Baseball. When you have this kind of money being spent by some teams and other teams are not able to spend that money, then we have to fix the broken system. And look, I'm a big shareholder. I'm actually curious what the stock did today. I've got several $1 million in Atlanta Braves stock. I told you guys, hey, I tell you when I buy individual stocks, most of my money is in S&P 500 index funds. But when I buy individual stocks, I will tell you guys, I like the long-term value of the Atlanta Braves. Stock hasn't moved very much today, right around $43. And frankly, it hasn't moved that much overall. It's a great buy, I believe, because the team is undervalued. And then you have the huge real estate property surrounding it. I like to buy and hold long term. I told you back in the day, buy WWE, hold it. I've still got my WWE stock. It's up about 10x since I told you to buy it a decade ago or whatever the heck it was. I'm going to hold Atlanta Braves stock maybe for the rest of my life, certainly until somebody ends up buying it, and you can buy shares. Everybody can in the Atlanta Braves. So I believe in the long-range future of baseball. I really do. But in the short term, they got to fix it. And it is broken, and this is a significant flaw, and it needs to get fixed. I don't think there's any other way to define it. Okay, college football point shaving. 39 players, 17 NCAA teams. It's been filed in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, and here are the schools named in the indictment. Let's see. Abilene Christian, Alabama State, Buffalo, Coppin State, DePaul, Eastern Michigan, Fordham, Kennesaw State, LaSalle, New Orleans, Nichols State, North Carolina A&T, Northwestern State, Robert Morris, St. Louis, Southern Miss, and Tulane. And a lot of different players involved on those teams. One of the interesting arguments from inside of the indictment is that players were being paid to throw games, to point shave, because the gamblers recognized that these college athletes weren't making that much money in NIL and that they would be more susceptible to being able to be influenced. I thought that was super interesting because everybody's talking about the negatives associated with NIL, and I do think there are a lot of negatives associated with NIL, and I've talked about them quite a lot. The way that NIL is applied, I should say, as opposed to NIL itself. I'm a capitalist. And by the way, on Major League Baseball, some of you say, well, if the Dodgers have the money, I don't blame the Dodgers for spending the money. I don't blame the players for taking the money. My point on that is they're operating within the rules. The rules have to be fixed. Sports are unique because the business is competition. In much of business, you're trying to put your competitors out of business. Walmart put Kmart out of business. Okay? Home Depot would like to put Lowe's out of business and vice versa. It would be better for them. You don't actually want to put your competitors out of business in sports. You want to create a better competition. The NFL is the ultimate in competition. We just watched the wild card weekend. You could change 2 plays and every NFL outcome would have changed as well. So the better the competition, the more valuable the business. If you're eliminating 10, 15 different teams at inception from being able to compete for championships, that's not good for the overall health of the sport. And eventually that starts to work itself into lower salaries for players because you want the competitive basis of Major League Baseball to be as strong as possible. And I think the Dodgers are breaking the larger system clearly. I'm pro-capitalist. I want everybody to make more money, but they have to fix the existing systems in Major League Baseball in order for that to occur. Okay, back to the point shaving indictments that happened in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. 39 players, 17 NCAA teams involved in the allegation. I do think the fact that players are making more money in general makes it less likely that games get fixed. Now, there certainly are allegations in the NBA where morons who are making millions of dollars were willing to risk their entire career and indeed potentially their own freedom based on relatively inconsequential sums of money. Terry Rozier allegations, Chauncey Billups allegations, Damon Jones allegations. So it doesn't mean that people might not be incredibly dumb in the world of gambling. I do think, though, as a general rule, the more money players make, the harder it is to fix games. And I'll come back again and again to this. I think this has been going on for generations. I think we are just catching people now because you can see the irregular wager patterns. I think shining a light on the legalization of sports gambling has actually made it more likely that we will catch game fixers than it was before sports gambling was legal. That's my take, and I just thought that was interesting in general. Megan Rapinoe, I don't know if we have this clip. I saw this tying in because while I was in Washington, D.C., we had the trans argument in front of the Supreme Court. And let me just tell, I don't know, it's a fun question. Have any Supreme Court justices ever watched anything I have said in my entire media career? I think probably the answer is yes. I would think probably the answer. I don't know who. I've never met a Supreme Court justice. I don't know any of them personally. And indeed, I've never even met them. So I don't know that for sure. But to the extent that anybody watches this show that is a Supreme Court justice, or they happen to see this clip, or I'm certain some Supreme Court justice clerks have certainly watched stuff that we've done over the years at OutKick. The resolution for the trans issue that was debated on Tuesday, here is what Justice Clay Travis would do. You not only have to say that all of the states that have banned boys from competing as girls, men from competing as women, that all of them have the right to do that. If I were writing the opinion, I would say this is a federal issue and Title IX is being impacted in a negative fashion. And I would say nationwide, there can be no boys playing in girl sports. Now, that's what Justice Clay Travis would say. My concern is they're just going to say, yes, the states that have said men can't play in women's sports are allowed to do so, but they're not going to touch the other states. I think it's 29 to 21. 29 states have said this is crazy, we're not going to allow it. 21 states still allow it. I think they need to say, hey, we are not going to allow this in any parts of America because it violates Title IX, because men are taking away women's athletic opportunities, scholarships, the potential to play on teams. Making a team is a big deal. For any of you out there that played high school sports, how did it feel when you knew you made a team, when you worked hard to make a team in high school? That's a big deal to a lot of kids out there. It's very important. You're taking that opportunity away. Credit to Riley Gaines at OutKick, who has done an amazing job on this issue. We've talked about this a lot with her. We've talked about it a lot over the years. And one of the ways that we talk about it is at some point inclusion becomes exclusion, because you're trying to include men who identify as women, but when you do that, you're excluding actual women. To me, that violates the spirit of Title IX, which is a federal law that applies to every state. And so I would have, Justice Clay Travis would, an expansive ruling that just says once and for all, this can't happen. And for people out there, so you're going to be checking birth certificates. What do you want to get in the business? Yeah. When my 12-year-old played Little League Baseball, I had to show up with a birth certificate. It said he was a boy and it showed his birthday. Like most of you who have kids, I've coached every Little League sport on the planet. I've coached baseball, basketball, flag football, soccer. I think legitimately I have coached my kids in every sport. You have to prove oftentimes as the competition grows how old your kid is in order to play. Proving that your kid is a boy or a girl doesn't seem like anywhere near an overwhelming obligation on behalf of a sports league. Anyway, so that's what my ruling would be. I would say under Title IX, federal law governs here, not state law. And Title IX requires that women's sports only be played by women across all 50 states in all leagues. Now, I think you could start it at like the age of 12 because the reality is I've coached teams with girls on them, and that's fine. And if a girl's good enough, when I coached 10U, I think the best player on our team was a girl. So if the girl's good enough, she can play up. But what I would say that basically to me ends this argument is no boy ever has to sue because a girl decides to identify as a boy and take his spot. Let me repeat that. No boy ever has to sue or ever has to raise an issue because a girl who identifies as a boy comes and takes his spot on a team. It doesn't happen. Certainly doesn't happen after the age of 12. And I think that's where you could apply it, roughly draw the line at 7th grade-ish. From 7th grade on, if a girl is good enough to play on a boys' team, that's fine if she can make it. But it's not going to happen very often post-puberty, but whatever. Gender-specific sports should be the law of the land. I can't believe the Supreme Court has to get involved in this, but Democrats are so crazy on this, left-wingers are so crazy on this, that I think that is the only solution that makes sense going forward. So that is how I would break all of this down. Title IX requires that girl sports only be played by girls. And again, to me, the mic drop argument on the contrary is, point to me a boy who is sued because a girl is too good and is dominating and winning championships in boy sports. It doesn't happen. You know why? Because biology is real. That's what my shirt says. Boys are different than girls. Boys are bigger, stronger, and faster than girls. And once puberty happens, it's over. Women's athletics should be played by women. And so Megan Rapinoe is a coward because deep down she knows this. Let's play the Megan Rapinoe clip.
When you're young, you believe that you can do anything.
And then the world tries to set limits for you.
Tell you what's allowed,
What's normal?
who you're supposed to be.
But on the field, the track, the court,
Here, you get to be exactly who you are.
Because at our core, we're still the kids who just want to play.
The go big game changers.
The living, breathing fabric of this country.
Supporting trans youth isn't just about sports.
It's about freedom.
On and off the field.
it's more than a game.
All right, that is indefensible from Megan Rapinoe. She is choosing politics over sanity. I would always encourage all of you to choose sanity over politics. She knows that this is an absurd take of hers. In fact, the team that Megan Rapinoe was on lost 5-2 to an under 15 boys team in Dallas, Texas, as part of their preparation for the World Cup. That is, gender, biology, is so real that Megan Rapinoe's U.S. women's soccer team lost 5-2, you can go look it up for yourself, to an under 15 boys team in Dallas, Texas. These are the greatest women's soccer players in the world on a team, not being even beaten by 15-year-old boys, the best nationwide, The best 15-year-old boys in Dallas, Texas, smoked them 5-2. Barely, kids can't even drive. These young boys smoked the greatest women's soccer team of all time 5-2. If Megan Rapinoe and her U.S. women's soccer team competed against a team made up of biological males that were actual adults, they might lose 50-0. Legitimately. I don't think they could score a goal. I don't think they could possess the ball against a team of actual professionals. I think they would lose 50-0. Megan Rapinoe knows it. She is a coward. She is choosing politics over sanity. And worst of all, she did it after she retired. So she doesn't have to bear the consequences of her political choices. We've had a ton of stuff. I got to get out because I'm late now. Kelly Stewart is waiting to do the fade. Appreciate all of you. I'll be down in Miami. If you happen to see deeply letting my beard grow out, going to come up on a month without trimming here. If you happen to see a bearded man, about 6 foot tall, devastatingly handsome, dashingly well attired, it's probably going to be me. Maybe not. But if you do see me, you can say hi. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. I am Clay Travis. This has been OutKick the show.